Okay, thank you everybody. We're back after a quick break, and super excited to be here again. And another topic today. It's another Thursday, Webflow SEO, and we're all discussing on something cool and with somebody who's also cool. And today we will be chatting about Webflow Ecommerce with Andrew from Arobase Creative. I'm saying that's correct. The name of the agency, Arobase. Arobase.
That's it. Yeah. Do you want to know why?
Drop it in.
So when we first started, so my business partner is called Tom. I'm called Andrew. Our initials are AT. We had a great creative session when we first started our business, and we came up with AT design, which needed a bit of work. So AT also is the word at, and the at symbol is called an arobase. Among other things, it's the French word for the at symbol, and we managed to kind of retrofit this great idea that, in the digital world, the at symbol is used for identity. It's handles on social media profiles. So as a brand identity agency, we set up an Arobase Creative, which has been butchered a million times over the years, but you got it spot on in one. So thank you.
Okay, cool. That was completely a lucky guess. So, and you said branding agency. So you guys call yourself like a branding first agency when it comes
to... So our background, we set up primarily as a branding agency. So we are an agency of approaching 7 years. And for at least 5 of those years, it was just 2 of us in the business. And my business partner, Tom, and I both come from a graphic design background. We both we did degrees in graphic design. And then we went into agency work, but we worked in branding agencies. So within that, we kind of dabbled in the odd web design project and stuff. But our focus was primarily on branding. It was logo design. It was graphic design and marketing services. You probably find that the web side of it kind of came from necessity. So we used to design websites for clients, and we would either try and hack together a HTML website that we downloaded from a marketplace, or we would hand off to a developer. And by handing off to a developer, we basically lost all the budget from the project. And we would often get a inferior product that didn't really look like what we designed, didn't really reflect our company well, and lost us a lot of money. So, to kind of jump ahead, that was where we kind of found, we were recommended Webflow. I personally took that on. I was genuinely curious. I naturally like to kind of keep my day-to-day job fresh. So I always like to learn new things. So I kind of dabbled on Webflow on a very basic early project. And, we're now talking 6 years on. I've been on the Webflow Experts partner program for the last sort of 18 months, and now have a portfolio of, I lose track of the official number, but probably 100 plus websites. So my personal role within our business has now become website. Whereas the rest of my team, we bolster on the design side, and the branding, the photography, the illustration, and the animation are all tools that we have as as we describe ourselves as kind of full service creative agency. You'll see on our little Twitter snapshot there that, we're talking about graphic design and branding. That's how out of date our company Twitter is. And obviously I stepped up to represent the business, personally, as naturally that gets far more engagement, and it's great to kind of represent the business within the community and stuff, and what I do specifically, which is focusing on the website. So that's kind of background of where we've been and ultimately where we are today. But now I wouldn't describe us as a branding agency today. It would definitely be a branding and web agency or a digital agency as we kind of move forward.
Yeah, it's digital agency sounds like what most agencies should be calling themselves. But it's super awesome that you guys went from
the issue with the digital agency, and to put a brand hat back on, is like if you call yourself a digital agency, the expectation is that you're a digital marketing agency. You probably do social. You're probably more of a technical side as opposed to the creative. So like the positioning nowadays is kind of blurred. But when you do a lot more kind of websites, and if not websites, then digital products, like it's a big pain point of mine, but nobody's really doing printed materials necessarily for their marketing. So even their marketing, even their brochures, their flyers are now digital assets. So you kind of have to say, you're digital first or digital focused in a way. It kind of just reflects like the modern agency landscape, I guess. Like there's not really a way of positioning yourself. I know there's a lot of, like, we had a kind of chat before the thing about designers, developers, dev designers, your positioning and stuff. Like we're all a little bit of everything these days, and kind of have to be.
So, and you mentioned that digital would mean a few other things that you guys currently don't deliver. Have you had any ideas on like branching out as a team to more kind of aspects? You mentioned social, but I imagine you would have other ideas as well. But like, have you guys ever considered like even branching out outside of what you already currently offer and just grow there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of branches already, I guess, is the issue. And like, if you branch too far, you kind of become maybe average at everything.
Diluted.
Like the problem, like we all went to university to do a graphic design degree. Our passion is in design. We all love graphics. And then if you start taking people onto like those technical projects, and I know this is the kind of it's your bread and butter, but you start getting a graphic designer into a 4-hour content migration from one site to another, they start smashing their head on the desk, because it's not.
They're gonna hang themselves in the office.
Yeah. We've had to take the ceiling joist out. These it's just boring. These guys need like creative, stimulating tasks and stuff, and we do have to be careful, because like we're creative minded people, we're not technically focused, and there are people out there that are probably far better at that than we are. So the best thing that we can do is, when we're scoping these projects, is we say to the client, full transparency, we're not going to handle your marketing, we're not going to handle your content plan, your marketing. So if you don't have a plan for that, we're going to introduce you to somebody now, because if you don't, like we said prior to the call, nobody's coming to look at your website regardless of how good it looks. So we need to start thinking about like how we're getting people through the door, because if we don't do that, then nobody's going to stop by and look at how great this is. So we stay in our lane. We have full transparency. We don't try to white label any services, because we'd like to kind of say to our clients, if you've got issues, don't come through us, where we're potentially like Chinese whispers. We're watering down your feet. We're watering down your comments. We're watering down the experts' feedback. Like, we want to make sure that experts are talking to clients and vice versa, so that we're not stepping in the way or offering advice that isn't correct. So that's our position. And as our business grows, obviously I'd love to have a team of technically minded SEO experts, paid advertising experts, social media experts, but scaling an agency is fucking hard. And
it is. Yeah, it is. And speaking of which, before we jump into today's topic, which, by the way, you already see everybody from the name of the video, that it's e-commerce and Webflow, which is a hot topic ever since Webflow introduced that in 2018. Shane has, by the way, hey Dylan, hey Aruna, and hey Shane. And Shane has a question for you. And the question sounds like this.
When? No idea. The thing is, my own imposter syndrome won't even allow me to answer that question. Like, I I do what I do. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but if it gets love and it gets and ultimately it's that's borne out in the results that my client gets for their business and stuff. So if it helps, it's good. All I do is take from the community. I learn. I look at things. I'm on Behance all the time. I'm just seeing what the best are doing and getting inspired by it, really. And there's not really any secrets to design. It's such a subjective thing, changes all the time. There just aren't right or wrongs, but there's so many people that can kind of give you the cheat sheets on that kind of stuff and advise. So I can't objectively answer the question.
Yeah, that was a good start, a good teaser for a hard question, especially those which cannot be answered.
Right? The day I was born.
Yeah. So that being said, let's jump into today's topic, which is Webflow and e-commerce. And you already told us a little bit about how you guys operate and how you guys got founded. And how the team formed around this idea of graphic design, right?
Yeah.
But how did you guys go into, well, of course, that probably means because you were working with product, you guys started working more and more with e-commerce as you branched out to websites. Is that kind of correct? Or what's the story behind it? How did the whole kind of evolved into being more and more e-commerce focused?
Yeah, so the e-commerce was always a bit of a challenge because so we've been using Webflow since 2017. Webflow started to tease e-commerce within that kind of time frame, and I don't think they kind of formally launched that until November 2018. And we always had this idea that like Webflow e-commerce was coming, and we were getting client briefs where they talk about e-commerce jobs, and we'd always be like, can we take this on yet? We don't know when e-commerce is coming. And like, we didn't have a website offering outside of Webflow. So we didn't come to Webflow from Shopify. We didn't come to it from WooCommerce or similar platforms. We basically came into it. We started exploring it from the day that Webflow introduced it. And we've kind of like finessed and added layers to that service in the 5 years that's kind of followed. But like, we'll kind of get on to limitations and stuff as we go. But like, Webflow e-commerce out the box, and probably still to this day, is raw. And you do really have to like understand the platform and what it can do to just basically prevent yourself tripping up as you get into build, because it is basic, but there's a lot that you can do to kind of build on top of that. So like with e-commerce, we approached it like very tentatively. We made sure that like the first project where we dipped our toes was really simple. So it was something like, I'm a brewery. We sell 6 beers. We need somewhere where our customers can come and chuck them into a basket and go and pay for it. And we're like, okay, cool. That sounds like the right project for us to kind of practice and see what this is about. And we like we did with our first Webflow project, we learned on the job. Like, we didn't like painstakingly go through Webflow University and spend hours just building random websites and stuff. Like, we waited for a job to come along. We used that as our first use case to actually explore the tools. And then we learned the hard way, really, with what can and can't be done. But like, yeah, like our approach to Webflow e-commerce came off the back of maybe only a year of Webflow knowledge more broadly. Webflow in 2018 was a very different beast to what it is today. I see people on my Twitter timeline today absolutely lauding the constant Webflow updates that are coming out, these like quality of life updates that people are describing it as. There was a time where that platform was just so basic, and you kind of smash your head on the wall to try and get stuff done. And that's kind of where Webflow e-commerce was when it came out of the box, if you like. So that's our entry to Webflow e-commerce. And obviously we'll flesh out like what we've learned since then and what you can do to kind of power that up.
And just, I have a quick follow-up on this question. And did you guys, like, if you would now think about how much Webflow Ecommerce improved since 2018 when it got released. Do you think, would you be thinking back then that would have moved more forward or less, or what do you think? Like, are you proud of where it came, and do you think still it was the right bet, or what are the thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it. I mean, I'm very optimistic. So like, I think it's on the right path, but I'm not at all kind of like satisfied by how far it's moved. Like the biggest issue with Webflow that like any Webflow users will quickly come across is the feature releases come out in a very kind of basic, at times half-baked, which might be unfair to say, but like you have kind of like big ambitions when you see them talk about logic, or you have huge ambitions when you see them talk about memberships, and then you get into it and you're sort of like, this literally can't do anything that I wanted it to do. And the same was kind of true of e-commerce, that it did a lot of things and they very quickly retrofit a few like small features that helped you kind of bridge some of those gaps and build out with it. But like, it hasn't really come along very far since they turned their attentions to other tools. It was like, we got an e-commerce service out that people can use, and we're happy with that, and we'll kind of call it a day there. But you've now got to a point where you've got this ecosystem of products where you've got e-commerce, you've got memberships, and you've got logic, but none of them talk to each other. They're all like independent services and stuff that if they had any sort of like kind of cross-feature patterns to it, I appreciate that we're maybe skipping ahead into some of the details here, but like,
we can do that. I knew when preparing this board that it's going to be jumping all around the board, because e-commerce is this topic where there's so much negative, but negative not from the way of, oh, we hate it. It's more about we expect so much more improvements because we know what they're competing against. So it's normal that I was kind of also preparing that this topic will probably not be linear, but jumping around. So just trying to locate which one was it. Yeah, continue.
Sure. I think like naturally I kind of like I've got into it now, but like Webflow does have like and will have in the future like a great ecosystem of features and products, and like we know from the conference last year and stuff that they've got big plans and like there's just no timeline. You can't rely on any of these future launches. So if you see Webflow announce a multi-language support at their conference, like in November, you can't be thinking in January that you're going to start a multi-language build, because sometimes these things take 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to actually become available to users and to work in the way in which you intend. And I was like, I know it's not really what we're talking about today, but like I was similarly disappointed with Logic and just the basic tools that are available. But if I'm trying to like bring that back to an e-commerce focus, like I really wanted to use Logic to build a Webflow native review system where a client fills in a form and it renders a review live on the page. But like you can't use multi-reference fields to attach a user review to a product. So all of a sudden you've just got this kind of like generic basic tool that requires an extent of manual editing to actually make it work. So you're just sort of like,
or a third-party tool to spin it around and bring it back in the same spot where it started, which is the weird loop to do through a third-party tool for something that stays inside the same ecosystem, right?
Exactly. That's what Logic was supposed to prevent and build on top of, which it doesn't currently do, unfortunately. But yeah, like to kind of get back on track, like e-commerce, like say, I don't come from a Shopify background or a WooCommerce background or any of those similar platforms. So I don't necessarily come to it with the same sort of like feature deficit that like some other developers might have, where they might say like, oh, well, I could do that really easily on platform A and I can't do it here on Webflow e-commerce. So like for me, all the tools and features are actually like new and they're all beneficial, but my pain points come from client briefs. where they come to me and they say, one of the features that we'd like to have is X. And I'm just like, sorry, we cannot do that right now. And if you don't understand the kind of the full Webflow e-commerce like add-ons, the app marketplace, like all of those kind of things, you're going to find yourself saying, sorry, we can't do that quite a lot of times. But fortunately, there are great app developers and makers in the space that are bridging the skills gap faster than Webflow can bridge their own skills gap, you know? So those features are sort of available. But the problem is you start talking to clients and you're like, yeah, we can do that, but it's going to cost you an extra £20 a month for a subscription. And then this feature list all of a sudden becomes this big kind of like add-on, like shopping list of things that you have to add.
But it's still the same way in other platforms.
Yeah, of course.
Like it's the only thing we're so got used to Webflow being so flexible, where you can build whatever we want without relying on other people's templates or other tools or whatever. And then but when you think about like how much a decent Shopify build costs per month, if you calculate all the third-party tools and apps you need to get, or any WooCommerce build, if you're getting like WordPress plugins that will be kind of, you know, responsive and not breaking, so they're maintained, which means they cost money. It's also the same here, but just everybody expects from Webflow to be more flexible and kind of cheaper. So we're in this kind of weird scenario where the marketplace ecosystem is way too little and way too small, and the solutions are quite stubborn.
Yeah, but there are probably two that I'd use from the marketplace, and obviously, and I know we've got a topic on that later on. There's a comment from Mike regarding like Shopify's CTO joining Webflow. Like we should be excited by that, but we don't know what that looks like at the moment. Like we don't know necessarily what a technical officer is being brought in to focus on, because you would expect him to have that insight and carry that over from Shopify. But Shopify, like we'll get onto the kind of the platform comparison more broadly, but Webflow is a design platform that added a e-commerce shop functionality, whereas Shopify is a shop system e-commerce that almost added a design functionality. So they approach it from like two completely different perspectives, and it's all about positioning as a tool and as a piece of software as to like where these guys want to go, because like the difference in tools or the difference in functionality is so small that like I feel like Webflow could quickly blow them out of the water. But there's like a reluctance based on the fact that they launched in 2018 and have barely touched it since. You're sort of like, I don't know. I don't know what happens in those kind of those team meetings and stuff, as opposed to like where they want to take the business. But like, I don't really get the feel these days that Webflow is aimed at your kind of your Joe Blogs who's just started up their own business and wants to build their own website. I think it is aimed at high-level developers, and giving them the power of e-commerce tools, like that should be priority number one. And then, you know, things like logic and memberships. I can only imagine that there was some pressure that kind of encouraged them to do that. But like, let's get the existing features up to spec, and like things like Shopify will pale in comparison.
Which is a great segue into first thing we had kind of on the list, comparing it to Shopify. Let's do that. Let's chat a little bit about, for those who don't know or never had experience. So obviously the two biggest players are WooCommerce and Shopify, that are driving most of the e-commerce globally. And Webflow is kind of a small, but also not small player in that sense. I think it would be kind of correct to say very tiny when it comes to e-commerce, but not small at all now when it comes to websites. And so you kind of preparing for this, you dropped a few ideas, and based on how well you documented it and prepared for this, it was quite obvious that you have this experience of chatting with clients and chatting with teammates and chatting with other people about, all right, so Webflow versus Shopify, or Webflow versus any other kind of e-commerce system. And you kind of clearly, from the way you formulated everything, it felt like the pitch deck is very much polished. So drop us the pitch when we can pick it and when it's not the right call.
Sure. I mean, like, just purely on a kind of a platform or software comparison, plans are like for like. So Shopify's basic plan used to be like $15 or £15 or something like that. So there was a massive cost saving aspect to that, to choosing Shopify as a business owner. And I would say, like, I know I wrote a little bit about barriers to entry, but like, I feel like Shopify is more geared towards business owners that are looking to launch their own sites, and that falls into the template nature of their design tools. Whereas like Webflow, I know pricing for Webflow is quite contentious. Not everyone's really happy about their plan pricing and stuff, but like when it comes to e-commerce, I think it's actually quite fair. The transaction fees and stuff are very reasonable, unless you've obviously got very low ticket items. So the plans are like for like. So then the comparison has to go beyond kind of like financial influence. Like, you've got to look at the design flexibility of a platform like Webflow versus the operational functionality of a platform like Shopify. So you have to, again, I don't want to get too far into other topics and stuff, but like, you have to scope these projects correctly, because me as a brand guy, as a graphic designer, I am Webflow's biggest advocate, in the sense that it allows me to build like really nice designed websites. When I try to do the same on Shopify, there are too many knockbacks. There's too many things in my way, like like with the templates that you get out of the box from the marketplace. And to take a Shopify website to where you need to go, you need a skilled developer, and you probably need a far greater budget than the kind of projects that you might find as a small business owner looking to approach a Webflow dev. So the design is very different. Obviously, there are Webflow templates in the same way that there are Shopify templates, but to edit a Webflow template, you need to be a Webflow designer to some extent. You need to have a skill set. But to edit a Shopify template, you kind of just need to be able to fill in a form. Like, you need to just be able to like click some buttons and change some features. Like, the thing is quite rigid. It won't really change too much, and you can't really break it if you want to. Like, you can put together a terrible website, like, as you can with any platform, but like, you can't really break it in the same way that a complete like novice first time Webflow user might jump into a Webflow template, and before you know it, you've got hundreds of div blocks everywhere, like in text classes and stuff. That's just what happens. So the design and template side of things, the skills gap is huge between the two platforms. But like, I would always, as a designer and somebody who's experienced in Webflow, like, I can advocate for using Webflow because I know how to use it. But like, if I was trying to advise say a business owner who's just tried to start a small clothing line, or they want to bring out some supplements, like, I'm probably telling them to stay well clear of Webflow. And I think that would be fair, because the learning curve is just too great for their position and what they're trying to do at that time. And then I guess another thing to talk about would be, which I'm going to kind of throw back to yourself, is that there's always this idea that, like, because things like WordPress and I guess WooCommerce, I think is a WordPress product, but like these other tools, they have like built-in SEO features, whereas like what we talked about earlier, SEO isn't a tool, it's a knowledge, it's an understanding. So like, people approach Webflow and they're like, where's the plugin? Where's the SEO settings? Like, they're trying to auto-generate stuff, or or ultimately cheap, which I have no issues with, but those tools don't exist in Webflow. It ultimately comes down to your bare bones understanding of SEO and then implementing it within your build.
Yeah, here you kind of banged nail on the head. It's working with Webflow builds is completely different. You can achieve same things and more as with any other platform, and I would say more just because of what's next to come. But for that, you have to become some sort of a SEO developer, not just I know that I have to install this and click here and tick this check mark and then bam, it's populated and here you go. That's what a lot of SEO teams do on those more established older platforms, which would be like Shopify or but then again, it's more of a just because it's easy to productize. For real results, you still have to understand the strategy behind it. And I heard so many stories already about, especially agencies moving to from let's say WordPress to more Webflow, and then advising their clients, to kind of work on this. On Webflow, but then the SEO department is the one pushing back the most, because for that you have to, for example, learn how to code a little bit. And it's not rocket science, it's not a lot, but to implement structured data, product structured data or blog post structured data, you have to understand how JSON is set up. And before there was an automatic thing, and best people in the team knew that already. So for them, it's not really scary to go and like, okay, so now I'm not going to be doing it automatically. It's not going to be pre-populated. I have to just think for myself, put the logic in. As you say, SEO is more of a concept of how everything is connected to everything and how to build something in a way that is helpful for the internet, not only your specific use case, but the internet as a whole. So that's a thing. And we have a question. So Aruna is asking what specific complaints you had from customers regarding e-commerce, because you said you guys build quite a few builds. That means you already probably have some feedback from businesses and business owners that maintain those e-commerce stores for a while, right? Do you have any kind of stories like that to share?
Complaints is a different thing, but I'd say it's like the challenges that come out in the brief of a project when you're scoping a project. And I think again, like we've got a kind of whole section on this.
Let's jump to it. Let's find that section, right? Because we mentioned it 2 times. Where was it? So scoping. Where did we put it? All right, so you continue. I'm gonna find the scoping part. We had
I mean, it ultimately comes down to just like you need full transparency, and you also need to it helps to kind of cast your customer's mind to kind of what does the business look like 6 months down the line, or what does it look like 18 months down the line. You need to know like how big their product catalog is going to grow, if any. Like,
and what would you say it would be too big of a catalog?
I don't think there's necessarily too big a category. The issues that I find with Webflow e-commerce builds is variance. I think it's a very kind of clunky system. It's very, very slow to edit and to manage. And I've used things like I've used like a whale sync integration to Airtable to manage the catalog.
And did you get it to a certain point where it's noticeably better if you do that? Because for those who are listening and don't know what it is, we're talking about products can have only 3 types of parameters and only 50 variants, and that's that, which sounds like a lot, but at the same time it actually isn't when you
so on one hand that isn't a lot. 3 options, like to give a use case, you might have you might be a clothing brand of sorts that's got a t-shirt that comes in colors. So that's one of your option sets. It then comes in sizes, which is another one of your option sets. And you might be able to say, choose a design. So that's all of it. You've got your 3 option sets that have gone then. And say you do a t-shirt that has 10 colors. You do a t-shirt that has sizes through from extra small to double XL. your variants disappear very quickly. And once you hit that 50 variant mark, like I think that is the maximum across all plans, if I'm not wrong. So there isn't really like an enterprise level that handles like a larger scale of business. But what you've also got then is within that t-shirt, if I want to do a promotion on that specific t-shirt, I have to update the price 50 times. If I want to change the image of that t-shirt, I have to update the image 50 times. I have to change the multi-image element of that collection 50 times. And all of a sudden, you've got this crazy amount of work to do, which should be some sort of like batch price edit or batch description edit or batch multi-image edit, which I've dabbled in Etsy as like a kind of maker on Etsy. On there, you can select all the products that you need, and you can do a batch description edit. You can do a bulk price edit. You can change all images at once. You can change your delivery methods, product specific. So there's tools that I've basically experienced elsewhere and sampled elsewhere that when you come back into a Webflow build with a huge variant, a multi-variant catalog, you bang your head on the wall, because it's such a long process. And if you don't use a like a database, a spreadsheet based editor, something like Airtable with a whale sync integration, which like is a great product, but you're again adding cost to your client, and you're also adding another thing for your client to use and another thing for you to teach your client. Like, you've already gone to the trouble of explaining how the editor works to manage their CMS. You're now explaining how they can like fire up this spreadsheet to create a bridge to manage their database from a third-party source. And all of a sudden the Webflow CMS seems weak. But if you've got, I think Webflow recently increased their e-commerce CMS limit. So it's now far greater than it was before. But like, you now can add thousands of products. It's 10,000 CMS items. Yeah, exactly. 5,000 e-commerce items.
They count variant as one item, right?
They might do, actually, which is another thing to bear in mind. I mean,
yeah, it includes variants. So
yeah,
and 10 products times 50, that's already 500.
Exactly. So you're looking at 100 product catalog. If you're an aspirational fashion brand that wants to launch the ASOS competitor overnight, you're going to hit that limit pretty quick. All of a sudden, you're exploring that advanced plan there, and like, this isn't necessarily coming into complaints, but we've kind of segued into the limitations sort of the plan almost. But it is really important to scope the project correctly, and to give another like couple of different examples around maybe like customizability of products. So we had a client come to us recently who I think they produce wedding cakes or cakes more generally, and when it came to like the wedding cake, they wanted people to be able to spec how many tiers, the icing finish, the decoration on the top, the flavor, all of these things. Obviously, you're going way beyond your option limit. So then you start to think, okay, well, can I use the Webflow e-commerce checkout feature for somebody just to be able to like type in their requirements? Which you can. The answer is yes, but if you can't educate your user that you can customize in the checkout, then the interface on that product page is quite raw. It's quite basic, and there's kind of like almost like a breakdown between what the customer can describe to the client, and for the client to fully understand like what it is that they're actually trying to produce. So like another limitation from there that kind of naturally comes out to that is just the super basic checkout features that you can add to your system. You can add a phone number, And I think you can add like one text box and maybe like a checkbox or something like that. I think it's super limited. But some people that come from a platform where you can like fully customize your checkout in terms of like how many you could add a whole set of radio buttons, or you could add a checkbox. You could basically again a frustration where Webflow have got this within their product ecosystem already. They have this whole form block setup, but you just can't add it into a checkout. Like the checkout has
I think I've been working on this a few weeks prior, and I think they improved it a little bit, but maybe you're right. Maybe it's just a few things you can do. It's not like fully extent, so I'm not gonna also argue here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very weird that such a flexible platform is so stubborn when it comes to some basic functionality.
Yeah.
And it was very shocking to kind of experience that. Which brings us to, you also mentioned you guys had like this issue, as in like chatting with payment in general. Like, is it enough to just have Stripe and PayPal, or
yeah? So I had a meeting. I had a meeting with a client yesterday. Bear in mind, we are probably, let's say we're 10 days out from launching this website. And I had a meeting with the client yesterday just to kind of like check in on progress and stuff. So from the initial brief, we've obviously told them that they can only use Stripe and PayPal. That's not an issue. Yesterday, for some reason, it became an issue in the sense that they started asking about all these different payment gateways that they can use. And I think where this stems from, obviously, I'm in the UK, so Stripe and PayPal pretty much covers all major debit cards, credit cards, and through PayPal use, you can use PayPal Pay in 3, which is a 3 monthly installment payment plan. And you can also use PayPal Credit, which is like a 0% interest thing for 4 months, and then you've got to pay for it. So like that kind of covers you from a, if you want to rival the kind of features that you might use on a Klarna or a ShopPay. But your users obviously have to have a PayPal account. And then my client's kind of friction came from the fact that like she's looking to sell products globally. So Stripe's card allowance may not necessarily work for and again, this is total speculation, but maybe for a client in Africa or outside of Europe or in South America or something where they might have different approach to these payment gateways and stuff. So for whatever reason, she overlooked that in the briefing stage and kind of thought, no issues. Like when we get to it, we'll add in all these other sort of features. So it is really important that you kind of know what it can and can't do, what you can do within Stripe, what you can do within PayPal. But these features that we've got on the screen there, like ShopPay is a Shopify product. And what ShopPay is, to my understanding, is basically an app that the user has where they've preloaded their checkout information, their shipping info, their billing info. And it's a one, and ShopPay advertise themselves as basically a one-tap checkout. So from a Webflow and an e-commerce perspective more generally, like what you want to make sure with your customers is you reduce the number of clicks it takes to purchase a product. So with something like ShopPay, when they open up your sidecar after adding a product to basket, they're clicking that big blue shiny button and they've checked out and they've got your product's on the way. With Webflow, obviously, they're going through to that checkout form. They're filling in all of their information. They've probably got Google Chrome autofill on or something that's helping them with that. But like, it just doesn't have the kind of like the sophistication or the speed of like a one-tap checkout, like Amazon's buy button or things like that, where like users are now not only familiar, but they're used to that. They're used to just going like, I've put my details into Amazon. I need something to get here before 1 p.m. tomorrow. I just click that button and like the elves at the Amazon warehouse like just kind of take care of it. And it turns up at my door in the morning. Like people are just used to the speed, the ease of purchase, like all of those kind of things. And so like Webflow, again, they launched these tools. I think they launched with Stripe, added PayPal a little bit down the line. And they've not really thought about it since. And maybe it works. Maybe it works for, I don't know what their customer service inbox looks like with regards to payment tools. But I've seen it on the wish list features that in certain countries, these aren't enough. And there's just barriers to entry again, where they're losing customers to similar tools that just do have a broader range of payment gateways. I know that, again, this is quite a random issue, but like with Stripe and PayPal, they have more strict kind of like ethical codes with regards to what sort of businesses can use those payment gateways. I've not tried to kind of to breach those ethical codes, but should you want to, Webflow is not the platform for you. They've got their limitations on things like gambling products, whether that's just like something like a raffle. It doesn't have to be kind of like underworld products and services, but like, yeah, there are just barriers and gateways to Stripe and PayPal that you can't really get around. So it's just about understanding those things, like from the offset, about what you can do with it.
Yeah, it's kind of it's very interesting to listen and understand that we have it good, but the issue is that it's not open for everybody, as you just mentioned, and I'm not saying that I had clients that are in this gray area. They might be in green area in some countries, but gray area in other countries. Hence, like they cannot use neither Shopify in this case I remember the scenario, nor for sure would be Webflow because of Stripe regulations. So they have to go for open source tools. So I think that's one area, but another is like, as you just mentioned, it's you have to remember that if your customer lives in certain countries, even within Europe, or not necessarily European Union, but Europe as a whole, it still can be that like Stripe doesn't work there or things like that happens. And before we jump to Mike's question, I have like have you been hyped out about Shopify coming? Because I know they're releasing beta now, and it's already early access, so you can get access to it. And I think they're going to be launching it soon. Have you been hearing about this, thinking about it? Did you guys consider it?
Yeah, and I've had a look at essentially what we're looking at now, which is the product landing page. For me, like I need to keep these tools in mind, because when the next problem brief comes along where I've got things that I cannot do within native Webflow tools, and we'll obviously at some point we'll talk about what you can do to kind of bridge some of those gaps. Like, we are going to be looking to Shopify and looking at systems like this. Like in the past, I've kind of considered, is it Udesly, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but ultimately it's like a bridging software that converts a Webflow into Shopify or vice versa. And like, I guess when it says, you're looking at the headline there that says best of both worlds, do you have to understand both worlds to really benefit from this, in terms of like what you can bring from one to the other? Like I'm certainly not a Shopify expert. Like I don't always know coming into these kind of like difficult client requests. Like, it may not be a Webflow feature, but I'm not kind of like, I used to be able to do that in Shopify, so that's a no-brainer. We'll use that platform. Like, I know that Shopify has a massive app marketplace and a very like robust ecosystem of like third-party tools and stuff. So if you're using something like this where you're saying the best of both worlds, are you still reliant on third-party apps, plugins, integrations and stuff? Like, what exactly is it that you're creating this hybrid of? And obviously you've got payment gateways, as we just discussed, could be hugely beneficial to clients in certain areas of the world. Orders and discounts, inventory management. We touched on inventory management and the kind of difficulties that you find as a Webflow user working with multivariate products, customers and fulfillment. We haven't really discussed at this point, but like, I know it's an area in which Webflow is quite light. So like I've dabbled in a business that used print on demand, and Webflow has like a printful integration, like kind of out of the box, and that works really well. It's good.
Yeah.
but that's it. Like like why isn't there 20 more? Like it's a really simple thing. And like so often I go on to one of these third-party software, and is that Shippo, like the logo on the screen there, and you've got things like Autodesk and stuff like that, and you go onto their integration tab on their website, and Webflow is just like never there. And there'll be all the other major players, there'll even be like a kind of custom code solution, but like Webflow is just never listed there. And like I don't, they're not working hard enough to kind of like be in the same sort of conversations and really like aid their tech through these third-party platforms as some of the other tools that are there, where you go on any of these and you'll see WooCommerce there, you'll see Shopify there on these app marketplaces. And like Webflow could just do so much more, which comes back to the kind of earlier frustration that we talked about, in that it's kind of just become like the forgotten part of their product offering, and it's ultimately a shame. But it feels like in the same way that they've recently put together their Webflow Labs department, which is working on these kind of like quick turnaround like product launches with their Figma to Webflow, like their bridge tool, like put together a similar sort of a team to work on your e-commerce platform and start picking up some of the deficits that you're losing to Shopify. And I really don't think it takes. I really don't think it will take a lot to bring those two platforms on par.
Yeah, that's kind of listening to you started make me think maybe this whole quick turnaround thing that we're now seeing on Webflow eventually will touch this.
I hope so. And it comes back to, I guess, the earlier question about the Shopify CTO. Like, and anyone that's trying to do e-commerce in Webflow right now is praying that is the sole reason that CTO came on board. Like, because, like I said earlier, I truly believe that design flexibility with fully functional e-commerce backend, like Shopify, can be brought down and quickly, because Shopify doesn't have design flexibility, and it just doesn't appeal to a wide range of designers. I say designers, so I'm talking about graphic designers without a development background and skill set, as opposed to the Webflow devs or the hybrids that maybe are a bit more like comfortable with it. But yeah, that's exciting. But aside from that blog post that announced the CTO coming on board, we've not had any of them sort of like teasing little interviews and stuff that explains exactly like where he personally sees this going, or where the opportunities are, and what the roadmap for the product looks like. Because we love I know we as a Webflow fan base love a little teaser. The conference, we got like 10 of them of features that we're still not yet to use, but we're kind of clinging on for dear life to actually get to use them at some point in the future, while other third-party kind of software and app makers keep us going for the time being. They help us bridge that gap until the features are there. So,
speaking of which,
yeah, go for it.
Mike is asking, what's your opinion of like things like Foxy? And this kind of reminds me, and I think you, the older days before e-commerce got released, or when it got released, around that time when there were ways to have Webflow e-commerce, but they were like hacky third-party solutions, which one of them was kind of Foxy, like you just said, third-party tool that bridges the gap, but also makes it usable now, as opposed of whenever, example would be like Vglot allowing us to translate sites, and Webflow one day will release ability to do that. So same here, Foxy was that tool. Do you have like any experience of those more hacky days, or like, have you had any clients or builds that had to create this kind of way, and you still kind of went for still Webflow, but now we're gonna twist things around and kind of plug it in some sort of use Webflow as a front end and then play with a lot of crazy stuff, and client was okay with that?
Yeah, I've looked into Foxy in the past. I think like shout out to Josh, the guy that kind of works in the marketing at Foxy. I think if you kind of mentioned e-commerce on Facebook in the Webflow designers group on Facebook, like that guy will be promoting Foxy to you. I've looked into it. I've tried to implement it. I used kind of, obviously we're talking pre-Webflow e-commerce. As a designer coming into that as like my first trying to put together some e-commerce tools, it's a very intimidating back end. It kind of looks like a pre-designed wireframe of what a back end kind of content management system looks like. And it was, for me, the learning curve was just too steep. So I kind of dabbled in Foxy, but ultimately my feeling was that this is a developer tool. It's not a designer tool. It's far beyond what Webflow positioned themselves to be at the time. If I was to revisit that today, I don't know, like maybe I'd feel differently about it, and would maybe my understanding would be a little bit greater, and I could maybe get it to work. But like I can't help but feel that some of the things that I was trying to do back then, I can now just do natively. Similarly, I have used the Shopify buy buttons, where you literally just take like a piece of code, it uses the Shopify backend, and you once you click buy, you essentially just load like a Shopify iframe over the top of your Webflow site. Like that stuff's fine. It works okay. You wouldn't use it if you had more than sort of like a dozen products, because the management of it just gets a bit crazy. And again, I'd kind of pitch that as like maybe a business owner tool, as opposed to, or rather it's probably more a business owner tool rather than like your web agency tool, because you're working on two separate platforms simultaneously, carrying out the updates, both sides, updating your buy button links, all that kind of stuff. It's just a bit tedious, and ultimately I feel like that basic level has been bridged. It's the next level that like we're all trying to go to. Like we're trying to pitch for bigger and better clients all the time, obviously. And it's when you go for those projects that somebody hits you with a scope, and you're just like I put together a little Google Sheets document where I did a functionality review, like an audit, and it was kind of like a traffic light system, and it was just a mess. It was, it's 50-50 of things that could and couldn't be done. And I found myself just kind of like writing, this could be done with X third-party platform, or we could probably hack together this if we tried this. And you're like, there are just too many things here that aren't Webflow native features. And when you start getting yourself into the territory of hacks and relying on too many third-party influences, it's bad enough being like one platform dependent in Webflow. If Webflow went bust overnight, 100 websites go down. But like when you've got Webflow, but you've also got input from five other app marketplace websites, it can just get a little bit messy, and you start to. I imagine that anyone that comes from a WordPress background that's used to plugins and charging their clients a hefty maintenance fee just to keep the project alive and spinning plates, it starts to kind of hark back to that, and kind of like the whole reason why people probably migrated to Webflow in the first place. So I don't have a bad word to say about Foxy to kind of review that, but I think there is a kind of higher level of technical requirement to actually be able to implement that onto your website.
I agree, same experience, but that was also completely the same experience as yours. Considering how long ago I've dabbled in it, I've assumed that it would not be this scary now as it was back then, and I completely get the vibes of like it's a more of a developer tool than just like a low level kind of entry. And to finish it off, because we're now at the top of an hour, I wanted for us to jump towards the magic why we picked this platform and why we still continue to build e-commerce sites on Webflow, and why we still say despite all this stuff that can be improved, there are still plenty of use cases that can definitely use it, and there's plenty of third-party things we can do without even relying on too much stuff. Of course, if FinSuite attributes go bust tomorrow, I think more than 100 sites online will go become a complete mess.
Yeah, it keeps me up at night.
You think you're scared that
Nah,
something?
I think these guys are solid. You know, I don't have any concerns really with that. But I honestly can't do a Webflow project these days without having to shout my appreciation for the product that they've created in terms of the attributes. Like I will use a CMS filter, a CMS slider, I'm getting more into their product offering in terms of I'm now using things like CMS static, social shares, table of contents. Like all of these things have now becoming kind of like staple features of a Webflow build, and they are absolute fundamentals of a Webflow e-commerce build, in the sense that like any shopping experience where you're maybe 10, 20 products plus, you're going to need to implement some sort of filter. You're going to need to implement some sort of search. I've used e-commerce style sites more. So my kind of like big CMS projects have been like almost e-commerce style, in the sense that they are B2C websites, but they just don't have the e-commerce checkout. So I'm just not using that functionality. But like I've used like I built a website for a furniture maker that wanted to have a fabric library on their website, and through that they had maybe like 200 fabrics. So obviously without CMS Nest, you can't render all of those fabrics on the thing. Without CMS filter, you can't allow your customer to select those fabrics by color, by pattern, by material, and all of those kind of things. And like these are just kind of like fundamentals of a shopper's behavior. Like you wouldn't go on a shop today, you wouldn't go on ASOS to find a product without filtering by T-shirts that are graphic printed in large, and they are grey, and they are less than £20 because you're poor. And you just don't shop without those tools. And like Webflow has been bailed out time after time by the fact that FinSuite have developed these tools. Also kind of need to mention that like JetBoost also offer these tools. I use FinSuite because it's free. And you know, I'll pay for it in exposure by shouting their name out on a YouTube stream. You know, so like these tools that are there, like they are fundamental. They feature in every e-commerce and probably every Webflow build that I do. I've recently kind of been introduced. It's sort of like just off the screen, but the predictive CMS search. I just started using that on it's quite a small project, but like absolutely love it. Love the customizability of it. The fact that I could go, my client is a homewares business. You could just type cushions. You could just type table lamps. You could just type throws into that thing, in the same way that you can search recipes into this database. And you can filter it on many different levels. So if you are running you're running some sort of recipes database, and you just wanted recipes that involve a certain ingredient, you know, you can type that in and you can start generating recipe ideas. Like it's a really powerful tool, and I was only recently introduced to it, but like instantly got all these great ideas about what I could do on previous websites, on future websites. So when I say like, when I come to kind of like recommending, not necessarily a client as opposed to whether they should use Webflow or not, but recommending to another designer or another developer whether they should use it or not, you really have to like indulge yourself in this like wider third-party marketplace, app extensions and stuff to know exactly what you can do. And another one that like I have to shout out because I use it all the time. I think it's you pronounce it as Monto. They have a great product ecosystem that bridges a lot of these kind of like client frustrations and pain points that I find through some of these like Shopify briefs. And the little graphic, if you've got it, might help. But if not, the kind of things that these guys do is abandoned cart recovery, subscriptions. They did subscriptions long before Webflow brought subscriptions native. Affiliate marketing, so being able to use referral codes, and then paying affiliates through their system. They have like an integrated reviews platform so that you can actually review a product, and that review renders on that product page. So you're not relying on things like Trustpilot or having to use.
And this type of feature not uses CMS collection items, or it does?
Yeah, exactly. So
it doesn't.
It does, yeah. It does use CMS. So all of their things work natively with the Webflow CMS. They've got a cool new CRM feature as well, where like, you know, if you're not from like a HubSpot or a Salesforce or whatever CRM you like to use kind of background, they've got this thing that's free at the moment that kind of gives you these segments on your customers and stuff, which you can export, I think, to CSV files. You can then take that CSV file and you can upload that to MailChimp to create a mailing list. So you could say, you know, on my, again, I'll refer back to like a clothing website, but like all my customers that like graphic t-shirts or they like white trainers, I can put them into a mailing list and I can start targeting them with my ongoing marketing campaigns and stuff. So they've got a really nice, and I came into this when they had like maybe like one or two products. And when you're kind of like an early adopter to one of these things, you can like really get into every feature launch that these kind of companies put out. Somebody coming into Webflow today versus 6 years ago has got a lot to learn and kind of like a lot to catch up on. Probably, you know, the same as the difference between me and the people that picked it up 10 years ago. Like, you really have to, like, when these new features come out, is like really deep dive in them. And so when you're new to it, like the Webflow University 101 is, you're barely scratching the surface, and you can only pick up that experience via indulging and immersing yourself in the Webflow community via Twitter, Facebook, wherever it is, and just being inspired by people, grabbing clonables and just seeing like, how that's mind blowing. How have you done that? Now I've got an idea about how I can build something similar using those techniques. So yeah, there's great stuff out there, which is why I see a lot of negative in this. This might form something of a summary, but like I see a lot of people on Twitter or other platforms. Somebody will put like a little bit of just like an honest shout out or a request where they're looking at, you know, what's Webflow e-commerce like? They're looking for an honest review, and you'll get somebody who maybe didn't understand it all that well, or had their fingers burnt by a difficult client, or it was missing a few features because they've come from a different platform, and they'll completely rubbish it as a solution. And I'm always quite like passionate about providing like an honest take on what it can and can't do, and just helping people that when they get to that like scoping phase with a new client, whether they just kind of need to be honest with themselves and say like, look, it's missing a few things at the moment, it's not the right platform for me, or whether they should feel kind of like confident and reinforced by the wider apps that are available, that like if they just spent a little bit of time picking up like a few code solutions to add to their no code solutions. Like I'm not a developer by any stretch, but like the only way that I've learned code is by throwing myself in the deep end, intimidating myself with some of these code solutions and trying to work out how they work by looking under the hood at the code and understanding what it means. And so Webflow, I don't like the idea, you know, the positioning that Webflow is a no-code platform, because there's just so much that it can't do until you add on your FinSuite attributes and your additional tools or your JavaScript, like to get it to fully work how you intend. So it's kind of like this entry level side of Webflow where business owners might like dabble and build their own thing, but then there's this whole other level that I feel like Webflow is focusing on more and more, which is powering developers to work faster, to go bigger, and just to create amazing things with, you know, far less development time.
Wanted to finish this off, unless somebody will drop in another question while we speak, with something we kind of touched, but didn't finish kind of chatting. So like a lightning round of, here you go. So we've been talking about how to price a Webflow build, but we kind of touched it at the same time, didn't. So I'm just interested, like, all right, so if there's like a designer or developer or dev designer or any other type of web enthusiast who are watching now, and they say, all right, so clearly there's specific things we have to keep in mind when choosing whether or not Webflow is the right platform for e-commerce, whether or not it's the right platform for this specific type of business. I imagine you guys are amazing at scoping after this much experience. Like, can you drop a few hints here and there? And I'm going to try to checklist this a little bit about what to look for when scoping, what to not to forget, what are like a little bit of that. And then we're going to end it for the day.
Yeah, cool. I'll try and help as much as possible, but it remains an area for improvement. I think it always is. You learn the hard way when it comes to scoping, to getting your scope incorrect. But the way I think you've got to approach an e-commerce project, it's similar to kind of like a big build in terms of CMS data. So you've kind of got to consider the design side of it, the development side of it, and then the content entry side of it as like 3 phases to the project. So obviously
3 phases would be, 1 is the design, right?
Yeah, and if you want to kind of preface that with some sort of like strategy and scoping, obviously that's going to be independent to how guys work. Like, but I guess the most important thing to focus on is when you get to the data, because you would scope, design, and dev the same website if it had 10 products or 1,000 products. But when you get to that data entry is where you feel the project creep happen, because if you're utilizing one of the like really painful things is the CSV upload for Webflow e-commerce doesn't work the same way as it works for CMS uploads. It misses out like a ton of fields. It doesn't play ball with your custom fields that you add. So all of a sudden you're trying to cut out a lot of the hard work by setting up all your filters, setting up all your multi-reference fields in this spreadsheet that would otherwise be a great way of saving yourself time on a CMS upload. That doesn't work on an e-commerce build. And I don't know why, but it doesn't. But that's one of the things you've got to be mindful of, is that you're going to have to manually input a lot of data if you're not otherwise kind of like familiar and using tools like an Airtable with a whale sync integration to kind of handle that product entry. So that's that's probably like the biggest thing I'd say to look out for when scoping like the time that you're going to put into the project. If you just quickly like spin back to the bullet points, just so I like cover all the things that we were going to chat about, but I think another one. So things like products and variants, that's kind of just to make sure that your client is aware of its limitations. But the same thing is kind of true for a data entry perspective. Obviously, one t-shirt is very different to one t-shirt that comes in 5 sizes and 5 colors, like, because all of a sudden that becomes 25 t-shirts. So there's time added on there that you don't foresee necessarily, or that can kind of come out on the project. And so, make sure your contracts are bulletproof, like make sure that you're just covered, and that you're not just spending like loads of time doing a task that you didn't foresee. Pricing models, I actually think maybe fits into a slightly different discussion, but like, it's really interesting. I had a client who did cleaning products. Their business came out around the time of the pandemic. They overnight segued into PPE, like as everyone else did. They started doing face masks, cleaning products, all that stuff. Their biggest asset was their wholesale product pricing. So they didn't have middlemen. They were able to sell their product at the kind of like minimum quantity, minimum kind of price for maximum quantity, because they had no overheads. But Webflow's system doesn't really respect variable pricing. So 1,000 of the same item cost the same as one of the same item. So at the time I worked with a software guy. We basically hacked the quantity selector. So the more you selected, it moved up through variants, and the variants were like quantity fields. So say 1 to 50, 50 to 200, 200 to 1,000, 1,000 plus. And we hacked the quantity field to be able to do that. I checked back on the project and it no longer works. So obviously like Webflow's kind of like changed something under the hood, and you know, that's one of them things that you've kind of got to keep maintained. But other platforms do have those kind of tools. So again, there is this whole market of wholesale based businesses. I don't know if you've ever tried to buy cardboard boxes, for example. I ran a B2C business myself where I tried to get packaging. The more you buy, the cheaper that item gets. And customers want to be able to use those similar benefits. And as Webflow shop owners, we're not able to offer that. So it's important when you're scoping out that project that you think, okay, this is what your product catalog looks like today. But what does it look like in 5 years' time? Because this may not be the platform for you at that point. Or like if you're looking to introduce, you know, you have one cushion today, but a year from now it's fully customizable, or you can print your face on it. Whatever it is, you have to understand that from day one, so that you're sending your client down the right path, that your conscience is clear, and that you're going to look after. You're going to be able to nurture a client relationship that's solid for years to come. Because the minute they start looking at what their competitors are doing, and their competitors start adding these features and extra bits of functionality, they're going to come asking for it. And you need to be prepared to say, no, it can't do that. We spoke about this in the scope, and just really like future-proof your relationship with that client.
I was typing the last bit of this and muted myself. So yeah, future-proof relationships. So that's a good tip, actually. I'm now also like building a personal. I have a few builds that we're running that are digital products, which, by the way, we didn't touch that. But if anybody's listening here at 1 hour, 17-minute mark, if you have a digital store, Webflow is awesome for that. Like completely awesome. Physical products is where things get
for sure
hacky. And now I'm also kind of building quite a decent build, but I'm taking on this risk because I know I can manage to work both with data and with the Webflow itself, not like most clients maybe can do. So I'm but also still listening to you for an hour and understanding these experiences made me feel even more like how much hope there is from the community for this to get better, and how long that hope has been there. And even now, like building something that will have 300 product categories on launch, and then according amount of products just to match that on launch day. And you know that you're gonna cap the biggest e-com plan like in no time in the first year or something. But still, you take on that risk as somebody who knows Webflow ins and outs, and still hope for certain things. So it seems like we're very hopeful.
The hope that kills you, as they say. But as I said before, the good thing, one of Webflow's best kind of assets is their roadmap, and the vagueness of that roadmap, in the sense that feature could launch 3 years from now, but you will cling onto it, you will scope projects using it before it exists. And I refer to things like multi-language. It constantly feels like it's coming next week, and it just keeps you engaged. It keeps you clinging on, and that was e-commerce for years. That was Logic for years. That was membership for years. They finally launched. They've been in. They're still very much a work in progress, and it's the hope for the next iteration of that. And like the fundamentals are there that they can build upon. Our hope is just that they continue to focus on it, rather than that kind of like shiny object syndrome, where they're looking at just adding on more. basic tools or half-baked ideas, just really to just look at what they've got. And in a similar way to how they've been making these little CMS updates, they've been making these designer updates, like the community, like absolutely mad for it, like the simplest little things. If they could just focus that as much into the core product as they do to the additional tools, which I can only hope they are. And I certainly never mean to kind of rubbish how much work actually goes on behind the scenes, but like I'm just like a massive fan of Webflow for e-commerce and a big advocate for it. And I just know that it's like a few of these like little basic things away from being, I'll never say perfect, but great and on par, if not better than Shopify. So like, yeah, I'll keep singing its praises, and I'll keep looking out for the naysayers on Twitter to kind of set them right, and really just kind of stand behind Webflow in its corner.
Yeah, everybody who picks, I think if there's like a takeaway from this, everybody who picks Webflow as their solution to problems usually are on a lookout for ability to control things as opposed to just use them. And that's what we all have in common. That's at least what the first wave of early adopters, which I think we are, those, even though Webflow is already now becoming a big tool, but we're still at this end phase of early adoption, is that we kind of all love, flexibility and control against some functionality sometimes. So we're going to sacrifice that. And that's where the hope comes in. So thanks a lot, Andrew, for being here. Mike is who spent, by the way, all the time with us till the end, which is awesome. Says thanks for your insights, and it feels like this was an awesome discussion where you just kind of lay everything there is to know about Webflow. And by the way, while we were having this, Webflow CTO liked me pinning him on Twitter and saying that we're having this discussion. So hopefully he sees it.
We need that.
Yeah. So everybody now who's still here, take this. Wait, can I share this in the chat? Yeah, I think so. Just go nuts with it. Tag Emily, tag everybody. We need this to be a little bit lifted up, because we all know Webflow e-commerce is such a powerful tool. We so want it to be so big and awesome and growing, but it still lacks this kind of core tiny things that are so important. And from technical implementation standpoint, they might be big to develop, but if they are released, as Andrew just said, this might mean that it would become better than any other platform just because of all the other great stuff that we have around it, right?
Yeah, that's it. Like we use, like you said before, we use Webflow because of design flexibility, and to just own like every part of the build, like to not be completely dictated by the fixed layouts of a Shopify template, or to be able to add in the sophistication, the extra levels of interactions, the animations and stuff like that are kind of synonymous with a Webflow build, like all of those little, the bells and whistles and features. Like we need those, but we also just need to be able to like get our product to the user when somebody buys it in the right way, and apply the discount codes in the right way, and those kind of things. Like that there was obviously within an hour and a half we've scratched the surface enough to give some people ideas, but see there's huge layers of detail to the whole Webflow e-commerce backend that like I could only encourage people just like set something up, like play around with it, build, just come up with a fancy business, activate those tools in the designer, and just like see what you can do. See what you can do within the shipping tab, within the discounts tab, setting up that business, because there's great stuff there, and again it's 80-90% there, and with some finesse, like it's going to be a great tool. So yeah, big advocate for it. I'm gonna just make a quick banner to close this today. So thanks a lot for everybody for staying. Thanks Andrew for being here. Thanks for sharing everything. And we're just gonna end this with a very simple
or the CTO of Webflow. Here you go. It's 89% there. So anybody who watched to this point, let's remember that it's not negative. It's just we're saying, hey, some obvious stuff is missing. But overall, we still pick it against any other platform, that's why I think we are so hopeful, and we hope this is going to move. So good luck, Andrew, in your builds. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks a lot for sharing. This was awesome. And I think we might consider doing another one of these one day, especially if they release something new. And if they don't, then we might focus on one aspect of e-commerce. That would be awesome, because I think the Webflow community needs this. And as you say, you're the one fighting on Twitter the naysayers, because you do it every day and you know it's doable. You just also are aware of limitations, just like I am with content management. And what I love about this chat we had today is that a lot of things that need to be kind of improved or fixed, like drag and drop for CMS items or products or variants, variant uploads or edits for multiple fields. So select all variants and set the same price. These are also needed for content management, for content strategy. These are also needed as basic SEO tools we lack. So it might sound like e-commerce is lacking, but also Webflow, by choosing to implement certain tiny technical things, which would result in big changes for teams that run the sites. Because as I say, Webflow is making money not from us designers, developers, SEOs, or whoever constructs the build, but from businesses that continue to pay that build price throughout years. And certain functionality for those teams that are maintaining it is still lacking. So we really hope this is going to change in the future, and we're going to be chatting about it once again. So thanks a lot for coming, Nate.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, we're going to be closing in for today. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks, Aruna. Thanks, Mike. Who else was with us today? Dylan was here, and Shane, and a few other people jumped in here and dropped out. So thanks a lot. This was awesome. This was Andrew. We were talking about e-commerce and Webflow, and we're gonna be closing in for today anytime soon, like right now. Bye, guys.
Cheers, guys.